Hello, and welcome to One Spark Stories, the podcast where innovators, creators, and some unsuspecting risk takers share about navigating highs and lows, laughter and tears, and how sometimes all it takes is one spark of inspiration to find your way to happiness. This podcast will leave you inspired to take action on your own purpose as we connect, create, and celebrate unique sparks around the globe, once again proving that it is a small world after all. Rita Ernst is an organizational effectiveness consultant, executive coach, and author of Show Up Positive. As the owner of Ignite Your Extraordinary, she consults and helps privately owned companies and corporations restore teamwork and positive culture. She has served clients including Gap, Humana, and Surgical Care affiliates, just to name a few. She's a speaker, trainer, and an article contributor for the Women in Insurance and Financial Services. She's also a recurring guest on iHeartRadio's Ask the Experts radio show on WHAS AM 840. And Rita holds a master's in organizational psychology from Clemson University. She's also a former adjunct professor of undergrad and grad courses in psychology and business. She currently lives in Louisville, Kentucky, and while she is in my neighbor state, I can tell you that we had a lot to talk about. Rita and I have an abundance of mutual passions, including things like psychology, our love of language, and for using that word, ignite. This was a great conversation where we worked through her story and how she is bringing impact to organizations today. Well, Rita, welcome to One Spark Stories. How are you doing today?
I am doing awesome, and I'm so excited to be with you, Katie. Thank you for inviting me to the show and for introducing me to your audience.
Yes, thank you for coming on. I think just from the initial conversation we've had, I see a lot of similarities. So I have a feeling this is going to be a conversation that sparks a lot of mutual interest in us and ultimately everybody that is listening. So when we get started with conversations, I often like to hear a little bit more about your story. So we'll talk about your business and we'll talk about your book. First, I want to get to know Rita. If you could give us just a quick synopsis of who you are and just what we need to know about you real quick.
So the number one thing people need to know about me is that I love psychology. So I'm always looking at the world through the lens of a psychologist and understanding what motivates. And some people get really intimidated by that. And they're like, oh, she's like analyzing me. And it's not that at all, but I'm fascinated about, what are the drivers of our behavior? Why do we behave the way that we behave? And I am a behaviorist. I believe that we have the ability to create what we want in our lives. And so I'm fascinated to see the choices that people are making and how things are happening. So that's probably the most important thing to understand about me. I found psychology early in high school, and I was like, I want to study and make a career in this subject. But then I did a foreign exchange program to Japan for a summer break, and which was fascinating. And that was when I came back and I was like, I need all of this teaming stuff that we're trying to bring into the U.S. At that time, we actually made things in the U.S. We had a lot more factories, not just car production, that made things in the U.S. And we were trying to bring that teaming ability that was a part of the culture of Japan. See, Japan is a very different kind of culture. We're an individualistic culture, an I culture, and they're a we culture. So they naturally build out their businesses in a way that people come together and collaborate and co-create. Whereas we have the military model of the commander-in-chief tells and it dribbles down and you stay in your chain of command. So we were trying to there was a whole movement afoot at this time, which is going to date me clearly, of how you bring teaming into our organizations, and most specifically to our production organizations, because we were getting killed on quality in the international market. And this was before the world went global. This was when we were still a little more micro. And so I immediately was like, this is what I want to do. I want to be a part of transferring this. And that's how I found my way into organizational psychology. And it has been my entire career. And it is my passion. And even after I had my kids and I decided to step out of traditional corporate roles so that I could have more time to be present with my family and do the things that I wanted to do, like be the PTA mom and run book fairs. I ran book fairs at the elementary school for, I don't know, it feels like 10 years, but it was a long time. And I loved every minute of it. And I couldn't do that and have a corporate job. But even when I walked away, I missed that intellectual connection piece of my work. And so I always kept my fingers into that. And when my second daughter finally got launched fully into school, I was like, okay, I think it's time to really get serious about this business and try to grow it. And then I took a little break to coach gymnastics and get more invested with my girls again when they got a little older. And then I woke up one day and said, I'm putting a lot of energy into somebody else's business. Maybe I need to put this much energy into my own. And then sort of jumped back in. And so it's been a fun journey, but psychology is my love and my passion, what brings me to this work, what brought me to the book. And that's the most important thing that you need to know to understand a little bit more about what you're going to hear coming out of my mouth.
Love that, and I'm fascinated at how many parallels that not only you and I have, but many of the other guests that have been on have shared in that journey and the ups and downs and that spark where they went, wait a minute, I have a lot of knowledge and curiosity and passion in this. Why am I not capitalizing on it? So we are going to definitely tap into that. Now, similarly, I took psychology and sociology in high school, and they were game changers for me. I remember taking those and feeling like I had unleashed a side of me I otherwise couldn't tap into. I didn't feel like people understood what I was thinking and experiencing. So when you had that moment, it became clear to you that that was a passion. Yet I want to go even further back. I want to think of little Rita, and I want to think as a kid, what was it that kept you curious and really in that creative space? Where did you enjoy spending your time as a kid?
I was an athlete as a kid. I had a sport for every season. And back in those days, sports did not last the entire year. I played softball in the summer. I played basketball in the winter. I played volleyball in the fall. I had a sport for each season. But my parents were like, you get one. We're not running you. I grew up in the time when life revolved around the adults versus how we run our households now, which is life seems to revolve around our kids. And I am equally responsible for that. But yeah, so I was always a sports kid, and but I can clearly remember, Katie, when I was in grade school, playing with words and language and making up words and trying to really use bigger words, bigger vocabulary. I still love a good $2 word. It's sometimes when I'm writing, I use Grammarly because you just get lazy over time when you don't, use those English skills that you learned in college. And so Grammarly catches a lot of those mistakes for me, but sometimes it will tell me your audience may not know this word. And I'm like, but I can't think of a better word. This is the word. This is the exact thing that I want to say. So I have always had a passion around language. And in my practice, I've always thought that language is one of the strongest tools in our toolkit when we are trying to engage and interact with others, because language elicits feelings. There's the connotation as well as the denotation, right? And so it can take people back. It can trigger people. It can pull them in. It can push them back. It's the magnet that has the two sides to it. So even as a kid, I loved language. I was much more of a language person than like maybe a math or science kid.
That's so interesting because similarly, first, to make you feel better, I still keep one of these by my desk. It's the old school like grammar punctuation guides that could keep in the binder, because as much as I'm a wordy, I am one of the people that mentally corrects grammar when I see it. And I don't mean to make it sound like a judgment. I just see the power in language. So again, it's very interesting that with the interest in psychology and the organizational psychology side, going into that piece, you are aware of the impact of language and the impact of interactions. And so as you moved into your career, as you returned back from Japan and noticed that there were some differences that, yay, nay, needed to be addressed, were there certain people that you looked at as really influential guides that you were connecting with, that you thought, you know what, they seem to understand this power too, and they're showing me that I have that power within me? Were there certain people that you connected with that helped you bring that purpose to life?
It took me a while to find those. I regret to say, but it's mostly true. Like in doing my graduate work, out of all the professors that I had, there was like one professor that really got it. That and early, I entered into what was still very much a man's world when it came to work. White men were still predominantly in charge. And interestingly, like I'll give you a small example, Katie. Early in my career, I worked in manufacturing plants because this was sort of this idea that I had coming out. Well, that's a very old boys club kind of place. And we were trying to implement team-based, like changing decision-making and processes and everything, and put these team-based structures in place inside of these manufacturing plants. And I happen to be in chemical manufacturing specifically. And so the old boy of the old boy in many ways, right? And I remember having this conversation with one of my early mentors who actually hired me. And we were talking about how the transition into the supervisor position, from supervisor to team leader, was much easier for the Black men than it was for the white men. And so we had this conversation about why must that be true? But we were noticing this, right? That when you start changing, because it is about language, it's about positioning, it's about questioning versus telling, it's about making space for the team to decide versus you deciding and pushing that out. And what we came to realize is that Black men had to navigate their whole lives in this place of tentativeness. They're not allowed to be bold and take charge. They'll get put in their place very quickly. So they naturally had all the skills that were needed for this transition, because that's the only way they could navigate life safely.
Yeah.
Right. And we weren't even talking about women, because there were no women supervisors at that time. There were barely women in the plant, let alone women in like supervisory positions. So, so my very early part of my career, it was a bit of a hunt for people. But then once I moved out of the plants and I moved into the corporate structure, that's when I started to meet women who could mentor me and could really sort of show me the pathway that it was hard to find in my early career when I was just starting out and I was in a plant somewhere, because I was just this brash girl who wasn't, who didn't know her place. I mean, honestly, that was sort of, and I was like, okay with that. It's like, okay, well, but I'm here to do something to make an impact. I'm not going to go sit quietly in the corner.
Why
over
do you
there.
think
And what?
that? Oh, go ahead.
Oh, no, go ahead, Katie.
I was just curious because when you say brash, is that what label that others were assigning you versus what you were assigning yourself? And, why do you think that was the case? I have my thoughts, and, I'm making a connection here personally, but just to clarify, when you say, oh, you were the brash one, if we could just dig a little more into what you mean by that.
I don't know that anybody said those words to me. So I'm definitely affixing that label, and I'm affixing that label as a comparison of what the expectation and norms said I should be like versus how I chose to be.
Yeah.
Right. So if I were playing by the cultural norms and rules of that situation, I would have been deferential. I wouldn't have tried to lead. I would have kept my opinion to myself. I would have been working behind the scenes instead of standing up in a meeting and asserting my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So that's why my term for that is brash, because I really think that that's of that time in the language of the culture of that time. That's the word that just comes to mind for me.
Yeah. Yeah. And as an outspoken, confident woman, that a lot of times is the first reaction that people get, oh, who is she? And it's it's a weird experience, because that's not, I would say 9 times out of 10, that's not the intent. It's not, you don't walk into a room with the intent to be brash or to create any type of tension. No, you see an opportunity, and when you speak up, it's because there's an awareness. And I think we've done a disservice to people for years by not allowing that space to speak. So you found it, and you said, you know what? I'm going to create my own gosh darn opportunity, and I'm going to take it by my hands, because sounds like you didn't have the person that was going to be that guide and connect you yourself. Or connect you with it. So what led you to taking that leap and creating your own, really writing your own story, literally and figuratively?
There are a couple things. I think huge kudos to Mary Baldwin College, which is now Mary Baldwin University. But when I did my undergraduate work there, it was a women's only college. And I know that single sex schools are not for everybody. And I wasn't sure out of high school that I really wanted that, but I visited the campus, and everybody was so friendly. I mean, everybody, I'm walking with my parents, and everybody we pass says hello and all of these things. But the time that I spent at Mary Baldwin, without any guys around, women are the leaders in every regard. So I was never toned down. For the 3 years that I spent doing my undergraduate work at Mary Baldwin, I was never told to be quiet or to tone it down, or I could just be Rita in all of my Rita-ness, right? And then I went on to graduate school. I did 2 years of graduate school and said the PhD doesn't matter. I just want to go work. I'm ready to go do the work. I'm tired of talking about it. I want to go do it. So I was like, I am done. I didn't even go get the diploma. I went to Hawaii to see one of my best friends from undergraduate instead. I'm like, you can mail it to me. I don't care. I don't need to walk. I just it's done. And I just need to find a job. So I think that, in the 2 years of graduate school is such a different animal. It's really like a job. I mean, you are there, we have very specific things that you need to be doing to complete and graduate. And I worked a full-time job while I was doing graduate school my second year. So I was not really building relationships I was just like, I'm a girl on a mission. And I have a path. So I think that I was, to use Glennon Doyle's words, I was untamed because I spent this time at Mary Baldwin that allowed me to discover as a young woman my voice in an untamed way.
Yes, that's very powerful. And
again, I am just feeling so much connection here. I have never walked for any of my degrees. So you're not the only one. I would like to pick up and go on vacation too. So, hey, to each their own, right? Now, I know many people that have gone to either all female, all male schools. And then I went to a public school. We had quite the mix. Yet I think there's a lot of power to what you're saying, because even though I was able to be involved and take leadership roles, there were norms, there were expectations. Growing up, the principals were all male. Nowadays, they're actually predominantly female. Superintendent roles are typically still male, but there's definitely power in seeing people that are in those roles. And when you spoke about your daughters and how, you took time to be with them, do you think that part of your drive is making sure that they also see that, you're capable, you're able to, and being that influence for them that you didn't have for years?
Well, it's interesting. I'll try to be brief, but my oldest daughter has ADHD. And we chose not to medicate her, and, really just sort of work through, because it wasn't that strong, like really helping her learn to grapple with that. But when she was in kindergarten and I think first grade, they had this treasure chest. Did you have this in your kids' school? So if you could stay on green all week long, on Friday, you got to go pick something out of the treasure chest. And she was the most brokenhearted little girl because she could never get the treasure chest. She couldn't stay on green because she's very smart. So they would have tabletop work and she would complete her tabletop work and then she would want to socialize. She was also very social. She wanted to socialize with everybody else at the table and distract them from getting their work done. And so she would get sanctioned. She'd get the yellow card, over and over and over again. And so I remember, so we fast forward now, she's in second grade. And in second grade, I went in, her teacher had a baby and got sepsis and ended up almost dying and missing the whole second half of second grade. So we had a substitute teacher and I was the room parent. And so I went in and spent a lot more time in that room because I was prepping. Like I would go through the cabinets and I would pull stuff and I would say, okay, which of these worksheets do you want to use for next week or for tomorrow or whatever day we needed? And I would actually literally like go photocopy and pack it and put stuff together for the substitute teacher to help her, because it's hard your very first time in a classroom or, first year teaching a grade. So I knew she needed extra help. And so I was in that second grade classroom all the time, just kind of off to the side, like a helper aide. But I noticed that as soon as my daughter finished her work, you do what you're supposed to do. She'd reach under her thing, she'd pull out her book and she would sit and read quietly and she would read quietly. So the next year we get to third grade, right? Now we're in the intermediate grades. And her teacher says to me at conference, I really wish Natalie would speak up more and share her opinions. I think she has a lot to say, but she is unwilling to speak out. And I thought, that's because you guys beat it out of her for how many years, right? You taught her that her job was to sit and be quiet and not say anything.
And up until they're little sponges, the true brain development, they're sponges at that age.
So lo and behold, she's sitting here being quiet, not speaking out or saying anything. And so I did share that to him in a nice way. But I said to him, here's the other struggle. The other struggle is that speaking up and speaking in public and putting myself out there is something I don't hesitate to do. And I want to be cautious about how I talk to Natalie about this. So I feel like you need to do more of the messaging because I don't want the message to be, she needs to be just like me. She needs to be her own person. And because my personality is so strong. So yes, I do want that for my girls, but I've also always been very cognizant of the fact that I'm wired a little bit differently than they are.
Yes, and that is something that when I think about organizations and talent optimization, especially with regard to engagement and employees, that is such a missed opportunity by looking at people, bringing them into this scripted, job description, and not really tuning into what opportunities they could actually bring to you, recognizing the outspokenness or the internal thinking that they do. There are so many values in confidently embracing who you are without going through that funnel and getting more and more siloed in thought, because that's really what's happening. So I think that is incredibly powerful and something that I'm sure you're able to help many people understand. And so before we lose total track of time, I want to make sure to talk about your book, Show Up Positive, because that is something, yay, there it is. So Show Up Positive, and it just came out this past summer, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So tell me a bit
new
about
to
that.
market. It is in global distribution. So it is published through an independent publisher, but we have a global distributor. So you can order this book from Amazon or Barnes and Noble, but you can also go to your local independent bookstore and they can order a copy for you. They can order by the ones in single copy. And there's some interesting things about the book. So I published it only in paperback. I didn't do a hardback version because I want this book to be in your purse or in your bag. I wanted to go to work with you all the time, or live at work. And so it's just under 300 pages. However, it's kind of equal parts, the first part of the book and the second part of the book. So Show Up Positive is a call to action. And the call to action is this, that you are an architect of the culture in your workplace. That is part of your job description, whether you want to acknowledge it or not. Every one of us shows up every day in our behaviors. The experiences that we co-create with our coworkers and the people around us create the cultural environment. That's not pretend, that's real. And so if there are things in the culture that you do not like, if you stay silent about those, then you are giving your tacit agreement to those. And so you owe it to yourself to speak up for the culture that you want, but you don't have to do that in a confrontational way that creates drama. The way I like to say it is you just need to start being the coworker you wish you had. And so in Show Up Positive, I shared this story with you earlier, Katie, but I'll share it quickly for your listeners. What happened, so my work is in organizational psychology, which is all about how do people come together to create shared outcomes in the workplace? And why are some groups high performers that can do amazing kick butt things and other people are on the struggle bus all the time? And what differentiates those things? And how can you help groups that are on, or work groups that are on the struggle bus, figure out what they can change to be more high performing and productive? Because at the end of the day, if we want to retain people as the owners and leaders in a business, those people need to be getting intrinsic value from their work. And intrinsic value means it's not about the rewards that you give, it's about how it makes you feel on your inside.
Yeah.
Do you feel like you're doing something that is meaningful? Do you get pleasure and fulfillment from the work that you're doing, from the people that you are doing it with? And what we know from all of the work that Gallup has done with millions and millions of data points is that there is codifiable data that says the highest performing productive organizations meet certain criteria And that criteria is consistent over and over and over again. And that is that people have competence, meaning that they feel like they have mastery and they are able to be their best selves and deliver. They have relationship, meaning they have belonging and a sense of stability in their workplace. And they have contribution. They come in and they give and know that they are contributing something that is meaning not just for them, but for something bigger outside of themselves. Those three fundamental things are what every person, or not every person, because my husband actually might be one of those exceptions, but 98% of the people need. It's part of our biology. It's part of our psychology. This is science. This is an opinion. This is science, right? So when the pandemic hit, we all got pushed all the way down to the bottom of Maslow's hierarchy. So there were people down here in physiological needs. Am I going to lose my house? What if I can't make my house payment? What, can I put food on the table? Because, some people got to keep working. Some people completely lost their jobs. Some people were somewhere in between. Aid was coming from the government, but we weren't really sure. So we got pushed to our physiological needs. And then the next level is safety needs. Well, when we're wiping down the milk carton and all of the Cheez-It boxes and cereal boxes coming in the door. Okay, I can think we can all safely say that safety was completely out the window, right? One day it's nobody needs a mask. The next day it's everybody must wear a mask. You got to socially distance. You need to wash your hands all the time. So what Maslow told us about the hierarchy is the next thing above safety is belonging. So feeling connectedness with others. And then once you have physiological needs fulfilled, then you need to have your safety needs fulfilled. Once those are fulfilled, then you start to seek belonging. And once you have belonging, then you seek self-esteem, which is that contribution piece. But if you don't have physiological and safety taken care of, you don't work anywhere else in the pyramid. You stay stuck down here at safety and physiological needs. And so the first part of the book just explains all of that and says, stop getting mad at one another and stop getting mad at yourself. Stop beating yourself up. Stop looking at other people, looking at who am I supposed to blame, because everybody was just being the imperfect human they are designed to be. And once we understand that, then we can have some forgiveness for that and some forgiveness for ourselves. And it's very hard to move when we are in resentment. Resentment is actually a safety need, right? Resentment takes us out of belonging and pushes us down into the safety space, whereas I don't know if I could be safe, if I could trust this person to treat me right? It pulls us it pulls us all the way down the pyramid as well. So until we can let go of some of that and stop looking for somebody to blame. And so I think the example that I gave you earlier, Katie, which is just timely, but it's like the hurricane that goes through, right? So COVID-19 and what it did to us psychologically was this hurricane that came barreling through our lives. It touched everybody and it touched every workplace, because who we are is who we are. Now, sometimes we don't show our full selves in our workplace because we don't think it's safe or it's welcome, or we want to reserve something back for whatever reason, but we are who we are. And so, of course, all of the stress that we were feeling, all of this psychology that was happening to Rita at home and Rita at work without distinction. So this hurricane is just kind of tearing through our lives. And depending on the situation that you were in, there were some work groups that crumbled immediately because they didn't have a strong foundation to support them. There were other people who managed along with minimal damage, but they're still finding like we've lost something and we're trying to figure out how to get it back. And that's why I wrote the book. I wanted people to understand why and what was happening. And I wanted to give them that playbook of, well, how do you get back? Rule number one of holes. Do you know what rule number one of when you find yourself in a hole is, Katie?
Do tell, because I'm not sure I do.
Stop digging.
Okay, good. I was thinking that. I'm like, I feel like I shouldn't dig anymore.
Yeah, don't dig anymore, right?
I've done that too many times.
But when we stay stuck in our misery and complaining conversation, we're just digging the hole deeper. And it's not that we shouldn't acknowledge that. One of the most important things about talking about positivity that I only learned after I finished the book is this whole conversation about toxic positivity. And I'm 100% on board with the people that talk about that. I'm not talking about false. Put a happy face on it, the smile and wave boys. Do you remember that?
Definitely. I do. I use that line often.
We're not having our smile and wave moment. I mean, positivity in its truest sense is about being true to yourself. It's being able to acknowledge this sucks or this is bad, but not having your whole self wrecked as a result of your circumstances.
Yeah.
Right. If you build strong positivity in yourself, you're building this bank account that you can draw from. And you need to, it's just like the hurricane, right? You go in and board up the windows and stuff, but if the foundation of the building is corrupted, boarding up the windows isn't going to do very much for you if the winds are sustained long enough, right? Because the foundation is going to be the problem. So I talk about in the book, building a bank account, and that's about practicing positive mindset and positive behavior, engagement, experiences with other people, so that when the tough times come, we aren't working from a depleted place, but we're working from a place of strength. And so the second part of the book is 50, what I call show up positive sparks, but they're words like this word I just turned to, purposeful. So one of the ways that you can show up positive is to be purposeful. That's not about being happy, go lucky and la, 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 right? But it is about if what I need as a human, right, is this competency and contribution, then how am I bringing purposefulness to creating that for myself? Because that's showing up positive for myself. And oh, by the way, my teammates around me in the business that I work for, they're also going to benefit from that as well. But that's almost secondary. You know what I mean? Like allow that to be the byproduct. You do the work for yourself. So there are 50 words, and I want people to go back to the book over and over and over again, because you can't say, okay, every day I'm going to do a new word, because you can't build strength. It's like going to the gym to build muscle, right? You don't get ripped muscles from doing one set. It's months and months and months of work, right? And this is the same way, right? So my guidance is spend a week or more on each word, like really take time to understand it and practice it and experience it more fully. And if there's a word that doesn't work for you, ignore it, pick another one, go somewhere else. Courteous, right? So I just flipped the book, courteous. Like, how do we, if we show up and we're being courteous with others, we're going to be feeling less triggered. So that's going to be a more positive experience for us versus when we go bombaloo and lose it all over people.
Yes.
And we're going to create this environment where being courteous could potentially become a standard for how we interact with one another. That's where you are influencing the culture around you and the culture in your workplace. By showing up positive for yourself and practicing those behaviors, you're showing other people what's possible. And trust me, you become this beacon that draws other people. Other people start to go, life is a lot less stressful when I work beside Katie. I'd much rather work with Katie because she's not bringing all the drama. And you know what? People want that.
Yeah. You are absolutely right. And unfortunately, I think we go through series of time where we won't gravitate that way because we think we should be following this direction. And after a while, you get enough wisdom to go, you know what, I don't have to go that direction. That doesn't feel good. It doesn't align to who I am and my authentic self. So, Rita, I could celebrate so much of what you said. I want to give you a chance, though, to kind of flip it. We often, give accolades to others and thank them for what they've done, but I want you to take a minute to acknowledge yourself. What is something about you that we could celebrate alongside you? So, what's a celebration you have for yourself?
Well, the big celebration that I shared with my friends and followers on social media yesterday, which please find me on LinkedIn. I'm Rita Ernst, Positivity Influencer. So I'm pretty easy to find. I'm not Rita Ernst, the famous painter in Germany. and then I'm at Ignite Extraordinary on Facebook or LinkedIn. I'm not using any Twitter or anything else. But the big one I shared is I just got my first royalty check for my book.
Yay! Congratulations.
Yes, thank you. There's been a few moments that it's like, oh wow. The first one that totally bowled me over, because you'd think like I should have known this, but it just did not compute. So one of the things that you have to do after you finish your manuscript, when all the editing and all those things, is you send an electronic copy in to register it for copyright, right? So I did that, paid the fee, and many weeks later, probably 6 weeks or more later, I get a letter in the mail from the National Library of Congress that says your book is now officially registered in the National Library of Congress. And I was just like, oh my God, I have a book in the National Library of Congress.
That's awesome.
I should have known, but it did not compute when I was doing all that paperwork. And it was like one of those blow me away moments of like, that is so cool. That is just so cool. A book with my name in the National Library of Congress. Like, who cares if I am a New York Times bestseller? I've got a book in it. Of course, everybody does, but it just is like, wow.
That's awesome. And you can tell from your excitement what that means to you. And I think that is such a reminder to all of us that whatever your version of success is, enjoy it. Sometimes we don't even know until it shows up in a letter and we're like, holy cow, I did this. I did the thing. And you don't even see it coming. So sometimes just taking a step back and acknowledging the realities that we really truly are blind to in the moment. So that is a huge celebration. And I am equally excited for you because that is something, it's not something everybody can say they've done, and that they have done so with such passion. So thank you for sharing that passion with us, making sure people can connect. I will be sure to link everything in the show notes so everybody can not only follow you, but get their hands on that book, because I know I love the way you call it a playbook. That is the way my brain works. Whether it's a playbook or not, I'm going to scribble in it. And so now it feels like I can actually do that and with purpose. So thank you, Rita. One last question for you. What is something that you want people to unlearn in order to live that life that they can ignite their extraordinary?
One thing I want them to unlearn. I think the biggest thing I would like, that I keep working on to unlearn, that I would like to share with your audience, is listening to the inner critic. We all have this critic that sits in the back of our head who jabbers away at us constantly. To the point that sometimes we're not even aware, but we all do have that inner critic. And that inner critic is the person that is going, oh, Rita, look, that's a flat spot in your hair and you're not going to look perfect on the Zoom, right? That's
Right.
the inner critic that is always going. If I listened to my inner critic, I never would have started my blog. People told me for years, you have such good content, you need to be writing a blog. And I was like, who cares about my voice? Who's going to read that blog? Who's going to listen to what I have to say? That was my inner critic telling me that. And I was like, yep. But then finally one day I was like, okay, well, this is like the SEO work I need to do. So I'm going to do it for the SEO. I'm going to start writing the blog. And it took a while to get going, but it was actually easy. I mean, I actually found that I had a lot to share and that it wasn't as challenging as I thought it was going to be. I would just be out walking with my dog and then the inspiration would strike for like, oh, you need to write about this. You need to write about that. If I had never started writing the blog, I never would have gotten to writing a book. So after I started writing the blog, then people started hitting me up about, you should write a book, you should write a book, you should write a book, you should write a chapter in one of these, books that everybody pulls together. And I just wasn't feeling it. I wasn't feeling it. But, during the pandemic, after doing some work with my clients, which I featured throughout the book, the book is filled with client stories and examples of that really help you tangibly connect to exactly what I'm talking about the psychology of what's happening in the moment. And, but I came into the office one day and I said to my office mate, I think I need to write a book. And I think it's going to be something like the ABCs of culture. And, I really want to give people a playbook for how do you create a culture that really allows people to have fulfillment and happiness and deliver real sustainable results for their business. And it was a whole pathway, but my whole inner critic, I sat with that book idea just in the back of my head, talking myself out of it. And then I decided to start like putting it out there to some other people. So I put it out there to my office mate. And then I've got a group of women that I network with. And I was like, I'm sort of thinking about this book. So then I started to test it because I needed other voices that were not that critic all the time telling me, it's going to be a lot of work. It's going to be, can you make your money back? Like, are you going to do all this work? What's it really going to be for? So yes, your inner critic, if you could just put your inner critic in the corner a few times, or say, I hear that, but I'm still going to jump anyway, right?
Yes.
It helps for me. I picture my inner critic as this white dude that I used to work for, which makes it very easy for me to kind of put my hand up and say, no, just go sit in the corner over there. Because that's what he did to me the whole time I worked for him. So
I'm pretty sure I can hear the voice of quite a loud critic in life that what's funny is now has called to see about working together. And I'm like, no, I'm good, but thank you. I wish you well. So yes, shush that inner critic and you do you, because that is definitely a way to just live a life of happiness and on purpose. So Rita, thank you so very much. I appreciate you, and I appreciate that you are helping others connect with theirs at work and just bring that back to organizations. So thank you so much.
Please share this episode with anyone you know that is looking to ignite their extraordinary. Also, make sure to rate and review the show. Those ratings and reviews are what help get these conversations in front of others that are looking for that spark of inspiration. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. And as always, be well, stay curious, and we'll see you real soon.
Did you know that grasshoppers have green blood? Whoa!
Later, Tater.